No, it's just gonna be a
Yeah.
thing.
All right. Welcome, movie watchers, to the third official episode of the Lunar's Cut. Of course, the Lunar's Cut is a playoff director's cut, where we have the idea of the show is to have a safe space for me and my friend here, Travis. I'm Kevin Kane. That's Travis Moon. A safe place for us to talk about TV shows or movies that we're passionate about that week, and raw, uncut, just a full discussion. Not worried about videos. That's kind of what this thing is about. Although we do have a video. So that for the newcomers, that's kind of what the show's about. We have the podcast up on Apple Podcast. That will be in the description. This is also a YouTube show for anyone who wants to watch the YouTube video. But the idea is it's a safe space for us to discuss things that we're passionate about this week. It's a new show, so we're still trying to figure out our structure. We feel like we did pretty good in the first two episodes of kind of having a structure. So naturally, in the third episode, I decided to pick a show that completely ruins that because there's no way to have a structure for this series. But it's not totally my fault because this week we didn't really have any movie in the zeitgeist or TV show in the zeitgeist that we really wanted to talk about. So we kind of went back in time. And my friend Travis Moon here is not a big anime fan, and I am. So I wanted to bring him into this world and probably one of my favorite anime series. That's right. We're going to talk about Cowboy Bebop. So, to start this whole thing off, let's start with I became a fan of anime in when I got laid off from work and I didn't have a job and I didn't want to do anything crazy expensive. I stayed at home and started watching Netflix anime, and that's where kind of my big session started. I watched Dragon Ball Z as a kid all the time, but I never got really into anime. So Cowboy Bebop was one I heard once I started really diving into this medium, and people kept suggesting it, and they're like, "Oh, this is a really cool show, dude." And I was like, "Okay, I'll finally watch it. It's from '98, whatever. I'll give it a shot." And I did, and I loved it. So that's why I wanted to have a show to talk about it. I'm actually using the show that we've created to make someone talk about the show with me. So that's kind of selfish reasons, but that's kind of my background with anime. Travis, what's your background as far as the anime genre?
So I don't really have a background in anime. My movie background for all newcomers, I have a more technical background in film and animation. I don't actually, I mean, of course I've loved it my entire life, but I actually spent some time working in it, of course, which I mean, this is all repeat for Kevin and I've known each other like 20, oh my gosh, like 25 years now.
I feel it's easier just to say since third grade, and
yeah, okay, yeah, however old we were then, plus however old minus, yeah, you get it. So yeah, I've never been into anime. I think the closest I ever got to being into anime, Kevin, was when we watched. If you remember, I think it was when we first moved out here. Well, we're in different locations now, but when we first moved out here, I think we went through like the whole Dragon Ball series, or like the whole. I can't. Which version did we go through? I cannot remember.
Uncut, bro.
Yeah.
Uncut.
I went through like the whole thing. That was like my first real experience because I knew you watched it. Like when we were going to school, as youngsters, I knew it was one of the first things you would do is go home and like knock out DBZ before you even did your homework, I think. So this is kind of like my first, I don't know how you would say it, maybe raw, maybe real experience with it because, I mean, of course, this is a 20-year-old TV show, but, DBZ, I guess I kind of I came in late, obviously, but at the same time, um, it was still popular then. I don't know if Cowboy Bebop's still popular now. I imagine it is.
Yes, it's very much popular.
Is it? Okay. I didn't know. So this is kind of like a raw, real, first, for me, it's kind of like a first time. Might as well just be a first time experience. Um, so yeah, I don't
Cool.
have a ton, so I'm just kind of, you recommended it, and I'm kind of like, all right, yeah, let's watch it. Let's do it. So
Okay.
I powered it out in like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, it's a pretty rad show. It's easy to do that. So the reason I went with this one is I feel like the genre itself, if we can call it a genre, I kind of refer to it as a medium. or media, a way to tell stories. Anime I've always thought was really cool how the cultural differences and just the kind of their tropes and their way of telling stories is super interesting to me because it is a lot different from an American standpoint. But this one is, I feel like it is anime, but there's a lot of Western filmmaking in this show, and I think it's that's why I wanted to expose you to this one first. It's a little bit of kind of a litmus test. Like, here's what you can get if you dig it. We got some other stuff you might want to watch too. But I feel like this was a good kind of half step or full step, or it's a baby step in the direction of kind of getting an anime. But ideally, what I wanted to kind of show with the show and why I picked it is this is kind of what the medium is capable of, and that is telling really, really fascinating stories. Their own way of viewing for this particular show, their own way of viewing kind of the Western cowboy story with their own bent on it, which I think is pretty fascinating. And because it's animated, they can get off. They can do crazy stuff, stuff we can't do in traditional live action film adaptations. So that's kind of what my idea was. And traditionally, for our structure, like I said, this is a weird episode, so bear with us. I guess we can kind of give spoiler-free review of this 20-year-old TV show. And if you want to stop right now and we motivate you to go watch it, then awesome. That is probably the greatest compliment you could give us, is if our excitement would lead you to go watch this. I would sleep happily tonight. So, because this is your first, I'm going to always go to you first. What did you think overall of the season after you finished?
So overall, I thought that it was a really good. So how I felt about it was a really good set of short stories that had an underlying, or I guess an overlying theme to them. So it kind of started off. So for me, it started off a little rough in the sense that I almost didn't know that the writers or the filmmakers knew where they were going. But somewhere around like episode 5 or 6, it was like they started to really figure out who they were, what they were doing. And I don't mean the characters, I mean the actual filmmakers, like what their goal was. And I really started to see a lot more come to life somewhere around episode 5 or 6. And I actually really started to kind of be like, okay, like now I feel like I'm in the show. So rough start at first, good middle, and then for me, it like again, it's kind of hard for me because it's my first experience with anime, so I don't have anything to compare it to other than to live action film that we're used to. So some of the up and downness, like this episode makes sense in the overall story, and then this episode like doesn't make sense in the overall. Like it's just a separate standalone episode. That's like, so if you separate yourself from anime and you look at that in like a normal regular TV show that we would watch today, that would be what you would call like filler writing, right? So like in a pilot season when you launch, essentially you're only doing like 6 episodes, right? And then when all of a sudden you get approved for 22 episodes, writers have to like figure out how to go, from episode 6 to episode 22. So you end up with these like roller coasters in the story. Some episodes don't really tie in that well and some do. So that was kind of my first feel of it. But I think now that after the show's over, all the show was really doing was just trying to, explore essentially the characters in different ways, and try to explain each one of them, because we actually get pretty far into the season before we get some of the backstory on Jet, or before we get some of the backstory on, can't remember her name.
Faye.
Faye, yes, that's it. We kind of get like into like episode 18 or something like that before we get their backstory. So, once I kind of realized, okay, now I understand, then I think it started to kind of put itself together better for me. So I guess to like other viewers who haven't seen it, for me, it would be something that you would like, if don't start it if you're not going to stick to it. You really need to stick it out, because like I said, I think it gets off to a rough start, and then you don't get some of the backstory of the characters until you get later in the season. So you need to kind of like stay there, stay put, stay involved, make sure you're watching 2 or 3 a night, whatever, however you want to do it. And then by the time the season wraps up, or by the time the show wraps up, it'll all kind of come together to make sense.
Right. And what I usually kind of do with any kind of, especially anime, but any TV show, because they are long form storytelling, I try to make myself give it at least 4 episodes before I decide if I'm going to keep going or not.
Oh, see,
And I
mine's
feel,
3.
yeah, so it's right around the same, right? We want to at least
Yeah.
give these people a little bit time to kind of get where they're going. It's
Hmm.
to get that inertia started, to get the car going forward. Um, and for this one, it is like I think we had mentioned off air. It's kind of sitcom esque as far as this kind of side stories, and I kind of see that. But this show. So let's go over my point. We already
Yeah,
know I
yeah,
love it. I
yeah.
already spelled that for everyone. But real quick, if you don't know what the show's about, it follows this group of miscreants, bounty hunters, as they're kind of living their bounty hunter life. And they describe it as I forgot what episode it was, but the first time I ever heard bounty hunters referred to as cowboys in the show, I only caught that the second time I watched the series. Um, so that's why it's Cowboy Bebop. Bebop being the ship that they're on. So this is set in the far flung future of 2070, where interstellar travel will be super easy,
Oh, yeah.
and but we're still using kinetic weapons. It's fine. It's fine. So it's set in about the 2070s. It follows our group of people as they go on bounty hunters.
Got some
I
whiskey
won't go
on
too
me.
far into it, but that's the kind of get you into it, like a step into it. And if you look at the synopsis, it'll tell you, very similar situation. But I love this show. I loved it when I first watched it. I loved it from what's possibly pound for pound one of the best intro music songs and just the best intros ever.
Yeah.
Like it's up with like the X-Men from the 90s, that amazing intro theme song. Right off the bat, I'm in. And this is just such a fun show. I like the characters. We get to know them over the season so well, and characters you don't think you would want to get to know, you end up getting to know, and then like, wow, I'm glad I got to know this character. It's a phenomenal series, and if you dig into it, I think it's it's well known for being super awesome. People are really into it, beloved across any fans of anime. It's just super fun. It's just a super fun show and an interesting show. So right now, if we haven't convinced you enough to go watch the show, uh, I'm sorry, but you should go watch it. It's awesome. But right now, we're going to start getting to spoiler territory now because I really want to talk about the show. So now, spoilers. We can talk about whatever happens in the show, like when Earth explodes right in the minute one. Uh, that doesn't happen. Um, But okay, let's do this.
Gotcha.
Spoilers. So the way I was thinking of how, because this show, like you said, is kind of it doesn't have a traditional structure. It very much has little side stories that don't really tie too much into the overall story plot. Maybe a little bit, but not very much. I figure we'll talk about the characters first because they are the most important part of this series. Which seems kind of silly to say, but I feel like this series in general it's very much about the characters, who they are, and the journeys that we follow. Their journeys that we follow. So let's start with the main character, Spike Spiegel. What do you think? Tell me your thoughts.
So I actually love this character. I think it's funny um, because I had like a 50-50 way of like relating to him.
Okay,
Like I feel like I related more to Jet than any other character in the film,
you
but
are a
there was
curmudgeon. That makes sense.
do what?
I said you are a curmudgeon. That makes sense.
I don't know
It
what
makes
that
sense.
is.
Curmudgeon,
Um,
the old ornery man. How about that? I'll use
oh,
those.
my whole Henry man. I'm like 9 days older than you. Um, the but it was his attitude that I most related to. He kind of has this like he gets angry a little easier than I do, but he just kind of has this easygoing, you know, like why is everyone making such a big deal out of stuff? I generally walk around the world like, why are you making a big deal out of something that's not a big deal? Doesn't have to be a big deal. And he's kind of just got this cool, um, cool way about it. I find it really funny. He's got a he's got a sense of pride and ego that he
Mhm.
knows is there, but instead of like working on, he just chooses to like double down. you know. So like
Yeah.
half the time when he's like hurt, he's like, "No, I'm gonna go," and then when someone's looking, he's got a straight face. But the second someone turns away, he's like, He goes back to his straight face again.
Yeah.
So I thought he was very good. I liked. I think his role was. I think it was perfect for what the character was supposed to do. I think his mannerisms, his who he was, I guess as a character, fit the role that he was supposed to play very well.
Yeah.
Um, so
His
yeah.
outfit is dope. I want that suit now with the popped collar that's way too popped. Like
Oh
it's so
yeah,
popped
yeah.
that you could poke your neighbor with the collar that's popped out so far. Um, so yeah, I like this character a lot. Just a quick summary of who he is for people that are kind of watching along with us that have watched the show. Of course, he's probably the most combat competent of the crew. And to start the season off, of course, we only are introduced to Spike and Jet, and we'll get to Jet in a little bit. So Spike is definitely the most combat ready, the coolest head. He has his moments, right? So like you said, what I think is he does have that episode where he's teaching that kid, and I forgot his name. It's in my notes, and we'll cry about him
Hmm.
later. But he tries to teach him how to fight, and he takes the lessons taught by Bruce Lee, where you're supposed to be like water and
Hmm.
adapt to things. I feel like Spike is the living embodiment of that virtue, just the way he carries himself, the way he fights, which is awesome. His fight style is amazing, and just the kind of his attitude towards life. But there are definitely triggers that will get him pissed off. We see him super pissed off multiple times on the show, but it's few and far between, right? But he gets really
Hmm.
pissed off. Like there's
Right.
just certain things that anger him a lot, but the rest of it doesn't at all.
Right.
The threat of him going to die doesn't bother him at all.
Yeah.
But the minute he meets a character that's a lot like him, and then one in the laser season, that living cowboy,
Yeah.
like he just irks his craw, and it's awesome. And everyone sounds like he's just like you, and he's like, "Shut up!" And like
Yeah.
he knows it, but he's just like super pissed off about it. So he's a really interesting character. Backstory on him. It's the season starts off with like his flashback, and it's a cold open, right? Because you don't know
Hmm.
what you're watching. And I do think, and I don't know if this is a positive negative thing, but I do feel like this is a series that you would get more out of the second time you watch it, because you have all the backstory before you start meeting all these characters or plot lines, right? So I've already watched it, so I watched that preview, the very first scene. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the thing that we'll learn more about. Like I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. Kind of like when you watch Inception again, or
Hmm.
Shutter Island. You watch Shutter Island again and see all the hints that, oh, of course he's the freaking person. Yeah, duh. Like, um, so we cold open to get like some of his backstory, and it's really not that much. It's kind of shots and glimpses, almost kind of like a nightmare that he can't wake up from, which he says in the show. Um, and so he's the head bounty hunter. Usually he goes out on his own because he thinks he should, or just because he wants to take out bounties. His character, he used to be part of what's called the Syndicate, which was an organized crime. I believe it was, I forgot what planet it was centered on. It's not totally important, but just know that they're a powerful crime organization. And it's in that first scene of the first episode, it kind of tells you that he kind of got away from that life, and so he's kind of put it past him. Um, and that's kind of where we start off with this character. So that seems like a pretty good summary. He's awesome. He fights super well. He's super good shot. He's just really good at combat. He smokes a lot, which is cool. Uh, he probably at times he shouldn't be smoking. He's smoking. There's a lot of smoking in the show, which I don't know if it would fly nowadays with the amount of smoking that happens, but it was cool in the 90s, right? Like that guy's was a real cool shorthand for that guy's cool. It was just like he's smoking a cigarette. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I like him a lot. And then the next character, real quick, if we'll go into it, before we start going into backstories, is the other character we're introduced to is his partner, Jet Black. I don't think we learned his last name until a couple episodes in, but Jet Black is the pilot of the Bebop, which is the name of the ship that they're piloting. It's apparently a fishing ship. I forgot the actual designation of it. Like, it just slipped my mind. But he's also a bounty hunter. We don't know much about him starting off the series, but real quick, he was a part of a police organization, the EIP, not EIP, something with a P, like I forgot. But he was a cop essentially, but for whatever reason got away from that life, became a bounty hunter, met up with Spike, and they kind of hit it off. And I really like their dynamic together, right? So you have the curmudgeon Jet, who vocally talks about things that upset him or irk him all the time. And conversely, you have Spike, who just kind of whatever about everything, right? Like he doesn't let anything bother him. It's a super cool dynamic, and they play very well together. And they have a interesting understanding of each other that's already been established before we meet them. So throughout the series, there's moments where it almost seems like they don't have to talk, and they kind of already get each other and understand each other, and they go and do things, and they don't have to have a long conversation to be like, oh, I need to go do this thing, and Jet's kind of like, yeah, I know. Like it's a super cool relationship, and I like it a lot. Um, he has a cool robotic arm. He has a cool scar and a cool like metal thing on his eye for whatever happened. He's got a really cool hair. He's probably the first person to pull off the Friar Tuck haircut and make it look cool because it like ties into this beard. And I was like, that shouldn't look cool, but Jet Black pulls it off. Like he pulls it off like a G. It makes me super jealous of someone who can pull bottling off like that. But yeah, what did you think about him?
I liked him a lot. So again, I related more to him. So I related emotionally. I relate to Spike. Psychologically, I relate to Jet. Jet is a more structured. He likes structure. He likes
Mm-hmm.
order. He likes to have a plan. He likes to go through the plan step by step. You know what I mean? Like he has, that's kind of how I live my life. I'm a little more structured. At least I think that I am anyway. Probably not, but I would like to be more structured anyway. So I liked his character a lot. I do think he complained way too much. But he kind of had to, up until Faye's character, joins the ship. Basically, he kind of had to. Um, I don't know what the right word for it is. He had to bring in some drama because Spike's
Mm-hmm.
character wasn't going to bring in any drama other than drama he met as he was out bounty hunting. But essentially every episode starts off with some dynamic between them two,
Mm-hmm.
and then Spike's like, okay, all right, fine, I'm gonna go hunt this bounty down, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's always like way ahead of plan, or you know what I mean. He like Jet is constantly pissed off at like everybody, because like he wants things done a certain way, and then they're not done that way, and everyone just kind of does what they want to do. He's just like, oh, okay, great, So
Yeah.
like as we
But
get
really,
towards the
but really he doesn't seem we kind of learn he doesn't really get upset about most of the stuff. Like
right,
he's not generally hurt by any of the things he complains about. It's just who he is.
hmm
Like I think you're right. If on that ship you only have Spike and Jet kind of has to make up for the fact that no one's complaining about stuff, and most of it's valid. Like it
yeah,
needs to be said.
for sure.
Maybe not as often or as
He's like Mother Hen.
yeah. He's very much the mom of the ship. That's a very good call. Like
Yeah,
he is the mom of the ship.
yeah. I mean, he's making sure everyone's like eating. He's like, I mean, he's always telling Spike to relax, or you know what I mean, or sorry, not relax, get some rest or whatever. You know what I mean? He's always trying to keep everyone together. He's always trying to like protect everyone and look out for everybody, and that's where his plans and his rules come into play. And then everyone just kind of does what they want. And he's just like, you know. So I'm not sure. I really, what is that little thing for? I don't actually know what that's for. Is there an explanation?
I don't know. He doesn't ever have like an eye augmentation, right? That has like a cool little Terminator like visual that doesn't ever happen. Um, who knows, man, in the future. I think if we can go off tangent real quick, I do like the details, the sci-fi details that they add into this universe that they don't really ever explain. We can get into that later, but that's one of them, right? Like you imagine what's that for?
Hmm.
Like maybe it's a Wi-Fi signal router. I don't know. Like who knows what it is, but it
Yeah,
looks cool. It looks dope, but I
yeah,
have no idea what it is.
yeah.
We know what the arm does. We know what the arm does, but
Right. Yeah. So his fake arm. I think he's cool. I think he's really cool. I would have liked to have spent a little more time in his backstory, coming from a police officer. You know what I mean? Because he's older, so he's going to have a little bit more experience. So you know, he essentially would actually, typically with experience comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes knowledge, and so you typically would expect him to be a person who shares wisdom. And it would have been really cool. And I think he was doing that, but it would have been really cool to see if like where he got this from.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire? It's
I
okay.
want to
It's okay if you haven't.
say no.
It's fantastic, but the way they tell the story is every question that he gets asked jumps to a time in the past of how he knows the answer to this question.
Gotcha.
Right? So it
That's
would have
cool.
been really cool to see if, he is the wise mother hen of the ship, trying to keep everyone together and keep everyone safe and look out for everybody. It would have been really cool to kind of see his time on the force, that kind of thing. But I really enjoyed his character. I thought his character was funny. I
Hmm.
thought it was very well placed, and I think he was way more badass than I think most of the show kind of let on because he didn't really get into much fighting. But I think
Yeah.
he kind of was. I think he kind of was a badass, actually.
Anytime shit hit the fan, he was ready
Yeah.
to go. Like you knew Spike was, right?
Right.
Spike could get shot at. He did get shot at and doesn't even move. Like he's like water. He just flows with it. But also Spike is ready to go too.
Hmm.
But or sorry, Jet. Jet, he does often have his little anecdote stories to kind of tell Jet or Spike how the kind of his lessons in life. Do you remember those? I don't remember them off the top of my head. Be like,
Yeah.
did you ever hear the story about the cat from Kathmandu? Like it just
Right.
starts off like that, and
Exactly. Yeah.
he just has it. And the voice actor's so good
Yeah.
at. And by the we listened. I listened to the dub. I'm assuming you listened to the English dub as well.
Yeah.
Uh, and Spike's voice actor is one of my favorites. Like he's been around for a long time. I love that voice actor. But anyways, the voice actor for Jet is awesome. And anytime he tells a story, there's often narration at the beginning and usually the beginning of episodes. Like we open up, there's often narration.
Hmm.
Anytime he narrated, probably an episode that's focused on him, it was great. Like that's such a great voice actor. It's brought such depth and cool. You brought that mother hen, you brought that wise character, but then he could also just be super goofy and
Hmm.
kind of aloof, and he pulled that off too. Um, Jet's definitely like more of a bedrock of the ship of,
Yeah. For sure.
and while Spike is kind of the person that gets things done, it's not like Jet can't get things done. It's just Spike does it all the time, does it better, and is used to doing it. But Jet, I mean, there's a reason they get along together, and there's a reason they go on jobs together because they work well together, even though they complain and yell at each other. So it's just kind of the
Yeah.
dynamic.
Jet was very he did all the logistics. You know what I mean? Like he's the one that kind of looked at the bounties or chose the bounties or whatever, and he's kind of the one that he dealt with. Getting the leads and doing whatever. Then he'd come back to Spike and be like, "Hey, Spike, we got leads." And then you know what I mean. Spike gets mad or pissed off or whatever, and goes and hunts
Yeah,
it down. But he did all of the legwork. He is like the found, like you said, bedrock. He's like the bedrock to the show. When you don't, if you don't have Jet, you don't have Spike. You know what I mean?
I did. I agree. But I do. I will say Spike does his own legwork as well. It's just his own brand of legwork.
Right.
While Jet's legwork is very much a cop investigator legwork,
Hmm.
and it's funny to watching. I'm assuming. I wonder how long it took you to think about him being a cop until they finally said he was, because all of his legwork leading up to when you find out he's used to be a cop makes sense that he's a cop. Like you're like, yeah, this is what a cop would do. This would
Yeah.
be the questions he would ask. Um, no, just cool. So if we're gonna keep moving along, let's move on to the next character, the lovely Faye Valentine. Yes, who somehow is able to have a red sweater tied on to her through the entirety of the show, and it never falls off, which I think is probably the greatest accomplishment of the show. Not the interstellar travel through warp gates, where like it's super freaking cool in this warp zone, like hyperspace. That wasn't whatever. That's child's play. This sweater never comes off, and I have no idea how this, because all it is just tied. Like she's got the yellow short shorts, the yellow jacket zipped perfectly to show the
Right.
perfect amount of cleavage, but then there's just that red sweater that ties the outfit together. But it's just wrapped around her shoulders and tied in a knot in front of her. Never comes off. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Except that one time she's in the dress or when she's in her night clothes.
And other clothes, of course. But I mean, like that outfit, the traditional Faye outfit.
Yeah.
If there was a cosplaying outfit, which I'm sure there is, and they're all amazing, they have to have their red sweater. Like
That's true.
The rug it really ties the room together. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So
very feng shui. What do you think? Which is an episode. She's So I didn't like her much in the beginning, and I think that's the way her character is written. So I think I think that's pointing to a positive thing, right? Because her character is like super annoying early on, and then it just becomes like blatantly obvious. So much so that she basically points to it in one of the episodes. Like when they don't have any food left, and it's like her and Ein, the dog, and all there is in the fridge is that can of dog food.
Yeah.
And she like takes it for herself, and she's like, because I'm a woman, we're sophisticated. You know what I mean? Like she's basic. Like at this point in the series, you're so far past her stupidity and her, maybe it's not stupidity. You're so far past her selfishness and her abrasiveness. That you just kind of start to like her. I don't know. I liked her a lot more towards the end. Particularly, again, I'm a story guy, so you guys watching this, you're going to learn that essentially, if you can give me a story, then I'm going to like it. Do I?
I was just saying, you're a story guy.
Yeah, I know, I am.
Just wanted to clarify for everyone who's listening and watching, he's a story guy.
So until I get the story, I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this person. And then I finally get their backstory, and I'm like, And I actually really liked her backstory. Her backstory was actually quite interesting. I wish we got more.
And it makes all of her actions before that point make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you know her backstory, you're like, oh yeah, this is why you're being a jerk and why you flake off and take money and run away and then come back and just it makes complete sense. So a quick summary on her character: when we're introduced to her, she seems to be well known as what would you call it? A con man as far as gambling goes.
Yeah,
that's how we're first introduced to her character. She's supposed to be a dealer at a casino. By the way, I have a note. That casino, baller as hell. Do you remember the casino?
I don't remember it now.
It was the location of the casino was like on a satellite. I don't think it was a planet. It was like a structured building in space. But the whole structure was made to look like a roulette wheel. And it was a satellite, so the ring was spinning around, probably to induce gravity or whatever, but it was a roulette wheel. Awesome. I was like, this is so cool. But she's supposed to, when we're introduced to her, she's got gambling debts because she's a hustler, and she has to deal the cards to a particular individual so that he gets a chip to which there's information on the ship. It's been a while since I remember watching this episode. It was last week. But the idea is she's so good at her job that she can make him win so that he gets the chip so that the illegal transaction can happen. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of her character. She's a hustler. She's a con artist. She's not a bounty hunter until she starts hanging out with our buddies. Our buddies, Jet and Spike. But what we should clarify with her is she's very competent. She can handle herself.
Yeah, she's a badass.
And she very much prefers to be on her own. So it's interesting whenever she starts hanging out with our main characters that's not usually what she does, but she kind of finds some camaraderie with our main characters. And as on paper as their dynamics don't make sense, seeing them in action makes total sense. Even though you see them fighting and bickering, you're like, they like each other. Like this is becoming a pseudo family for everyone. So Faye's character, just I don't know if we're going to ruin her backstory yet, but her backstory is that she's a woman without a past. And so that's and what I mean by without a past, meaning she can't remember her past. She has amnesia of sorts. So that's kind of give you an idea about her character. But she brings a level of swagger that's comparable to Spike's. It's a different swagger on her own. But it's another fully capable person to go out on bounties so that Jet can kind of plan everything and be the guy behind the computer on the ship. And she has her own way of doing things and getting information and performing bounties, right? She's super capable and doing her job. And we see that in some episodes where they all three have to like get a bounty and they do it in their own way. And she does it super slick and uses her seduction takes and her con artist ways to also kind of get the job done. And I like her character a lot. She's just so cool. She's goofy. She brings a little bit of lightheartedness and comedy in there. They all kind of do, but she brings her own dynamic that I think suits really well with the crew. So we skipped over a character in order. If I wanted to be technical, I think there's another character who was introduced before Faye. And
yeah, but I thought we were going in order of like importance rather than introduction.
you could argue, pound for pound, the most important character in this show is that beloved corgi Ein. E-I-N.
I could not argue that.
It's the glue that holds our family together. Because not only is Ein just, no matter how bad it is, Ein comes in and is like, hey guys, I'm a cute ass dog. And everyone's like, you're right, you're cute. But what's really interesting about the Ein character is that he is a character. I'm not just saying that there's a dog on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Backstory of him, we're introduced to him because there's a bounty on a gentleman who has a case. And in the case, we find Ein. And it's because Ein, the corgi, was scientifically altered. And I forgot the exact backstory because I don't think they go into it too much.
They don't. You know, after that episode, it's like done.
He's had some stuff done to him, right? Mm-hmm. And so but slowly over the course of the series, you start to kind of figure out this is not just a normal dog. This dog, although he barks and wags his tail and floats around in zero G like a goofball, like he is not a normal dog. I think heightened from that one episode where there was the religious cult who wanted to separate people from their bodies into the machine.
Yeah.
Where the dog puts on the VR headset and hacks into it, and you're like, this dog is a hacker apparently. Like, it's awesome. Like, and there's often times where he warns people. He knows stuff's bad.
Right.
So it's kind of like playing off the instincts of a dog, where that happens in real life, where they kind of freak out because some stuff's happening. In fact, anecdote about my personal life: my friend Casey, who you know, brought her 2 dogs over to hang out at my house. They started freaking out for whatever reason in my apartment. They were just freaking out. And we were like, okay, I guess we'll go walk them. And then we go walk downstairs, and on the door from the stairway leading to the garage. So there, in this particular room, there's a door to go to the outside, a door to go to the parking garage, and stairs to go to the first floor. So we open that door, and there's a cop standing at the entrance to the parking garage with an, and we're like, oh my. And so he's like, get the hell out of here, because who knows what his dog's going to do with the other dogs there. But we're like, oh, and we ran out and found another way out of the apartment. Turns out there was a dude with a gun running around our apartment complex, and they knew. That's why they were freaking out. They're like, there's some shit's going down outside. So Ein often knows. He barks and gets really upset and yells at computers. He makes a phone call at one point where he answers the phone whenever he calls one time. Like, this dog is a smart dog. It's been altered somehow to be more than a dog, and he knows. I think he fully understands everything that's going down on the ship, all the things they're doing. Helps out when he can. And he just brings that extra levity to sometimes they're kind of bad. He's just a fun little character. I love that dog. That dog is awesome. I don't know how you feel. You're more of a dog person than I am.
Yeah, I am a dog person. I've been a dog person my whole life. I got 2 little critters running around here somewhere. I like him. I guess I felt like his story just kind of fell off the end. We learned that he's genetically enhanced, or he was genetically developed. I can't remember which one it was. But I was actually pretty excited because it's like episode 3 or 4 or something like that. It's pretty early in the series when we see that. And then it's kind of like out of nowhere, he's just like, oh, okay. He's just, he's a part of the Bebop crew. That's cool. I thought it was interesting that he takes particularly to a character who we haven't introduced yet. So I won't say it. We'll let you introduce the character first. So that part was kind of interesting. But I will say this. I was like, super like sad and like pulled away at the end. I was like, no, what are you doing? Where are you going? um, you know what I mean? So like I do think he's an important part of the show of the series. Um, but I don't know. Like for me, it was kind of like I just didn't fully understand, the depth, right? Because like the episode where he like answers the phone, like he answers like FaceTime, right, when Faye's calling, and Faye actually talks to Ein like she's like it's normal for her to see
Yeah,
this happen.
yeah.
Hey
We
Faye,
all
can
talk
I?
to our dogs. We all
Exactly,
talk
I
to our
guess.
dogs.
And then Ein just like hands the phone over. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like it was just a tiny little thing, but it was like
Yeah, yeah.
okay, like what am I supposed to take from that? I'm often like seeing him in the show or whatever, and I'm kind of like, you know what I mean? Like it just leaves me with like, what am I supposed to think? What am I supposed to say? Like I don't know. It's
So,
cool, but like I don't know what to do with it.
so his background, real quick on the Wikipedia. Ein is referred to as a data dog by the scientists that created him. I remember that now. He often shows heightened awareness of events going on around him. Over the course of the series, Ein answers the telephone, steers a car, uses the SSW, plays shogi, operates the Brain Dream gaming device, which I spoke of earlier, and generally performs tasks that an average canine would not be able to accomplish. It mentions real quick, so I can stop reading to you, that the manga goes more into, I guess, goes into like this is more of his backstory. But I forgot, Ein is able to speak to other species, as demonstrated in session 17, Mushroom Samba, an awesome episode, where he speaks to that cow that stopped in front of the train.
Yeah.
Such a fun show. So that's Ein, a corgi dog that is engineered, genetically altered, whatever you want, a data dog who kind of like I like keeping him as the glue that kind of keeps this team together because as upset as they can get at each other, he's always there to kind of keep them all together and kind of like everyone gets real upset, like even Jet will get real upset and then he'll start pitting Ein, right? Like and
Right.
he'll be like, yeah. So that's that character. And our last character, but not least, is and honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and I want to read off her full entire name. Um, let's see if we have it in English because I have it in Japanese and I can't pronounce Japanese.
Edward.
Edward Wong Hao Pepulu Tversky the Fourth is
The
her name.
fourth.
The
I didn't
wiki.
know she was the fourth.
Yeah. So Ed, who I think for maybe just a small amount of time they believe is a boy because she names herself Ed, but she's a girl, very young. I want to say I don't think we ever got an age on her, but I would say she can't be a teen, right? I think she's pretty young. She's a
Oh man, I would have guessed like 13 or 14, so I would say teen, but adolescent teen.
barely a teen. Um, we meet her. She's a elite hacker who everyone knows by name, but doesn't ever know what this hacker looks like. And the hacking, that's one thing about the show, the cool way they show hacking, where she wears like goggles to kind of like sift through a virtual reality of computers. It's really cool. So she's a very well-known hacker who the reason we're introduced to her is I guess she was following the antics of the Bebop and convinced them to come to her planet Earth, which we can go on the backstory of Earth later, which is kind of cool. Like I think the part of our discussion with the little stories in the background, like we can kind of talk about it. Let's focus on people first. She's on Earth. She convinces the Bebop to show up there so that she can join the crew, and she's just kind of living her life, kind of bored, and she's like, "Well, I'm going to join you guys." And in fact, it's an ultimatum in that episode with Faye. She's going to help them catch their bounty if she can join the Bebop. So that's how we finally get our last character of Edward. And Edward is a very endearing, goofy kid who is lightning smart, way beyond her years, but still has the innocence of a child and totally shows that off at all times. If there ever was a comedic element for this show, this is very Edward is a constant comedic element. She's always doing some goofy stuff, uh, walking weird, laying somewhere weird, falling down, hurting herself. Um, Like when she hacks into the Bebop as they leave, because Faye's like, "No, you're not joining us," and she hacks into the Bebop and lands it. And she's like, "I'm joining you guys," and she ends up being kind of the overall levity of the show needs, but she often ends up helping out on a lot of the bounties that they chase as far as the hacker goes. While Jet kind of had to fill that, Edward's so much better at it. So it lets Jet kind of go off and do some things if he wants to, while Ed kind of looks for information, finds out where this person is, uh, has that really great episode with the gentleman who is he was part of the Warpgate team scientist, and he got fired because he didn't think the warp gates were safe. So the warp gates are a system of circular gates that allow for interstellar travel through what seems to be kind of like a wormhole. They don't go into it, which I kind of like. Like, it's fine. Like, I get it. That's what this thing is.
We just accept this. This is just the way it is.
And he was like, "You guys shouldn't go public with this technology. It's not safe. I don't think we should do this." And of course, the company was like, "Well, shut that guy up. Like, we got to get this going so we can get money." And so he devised this like long-term plan to get back at him. And Edward, of course, kind of has to go after that character because he's a computer. A large lot of his plot is through computer antics or whatnot. I'm not a hacker, if you can't tell. And they have that really awesome chess match that Edward's just like kind of like totally going for it and like super animated. And the old man's like, "God, I haven't had a chess match like this in forever." And it's like them just
playing. A week.
Yeah,
the game lasted a week.
So Edward kind of brings that hacker vibe into it, but also I don't want to not highlight the charm that she has and the levity that she brings, and just kind of that dynamic that I feel really kind of completes this overall family that we're kind of introduced to. So what'd you have to think about Ed?
I think she's awesome. I think I love like everything of her, every little quirk. She definitely has the innocent, naive little child thing going on. But then when she's in the zone, like, don't touch me, don't talk to me, don't bother me, like I'm doing something. She just is always in the zone with something, you know. Like there's that one episode towards the end where Spike gets the invitation to that party, right? That ends up being at that carnival where that bad guy tries to kill him.
Yeah.
And Edward is like walking around, you know, like with the invitation or whatever, and Faye stops it, you know. He's like, "God, don't tell Spike." And Spike looks at it. Well, she's just like dancing.
Yeah.
Right? And Spike like grabs a hold of her head to stop her head. But then when it zooms out, her body is still dancing.
Still dancing.
Still. I think it's just
she's
such
a goofball.
She is. She's such a super nerd. But I also really like the fact that there's an underlying abandonment issue going on that, you know, we learn about with her father. And she deals with it extremely well. She deals with it like an adult. And not only like an adult, like an experienced adult. Like almost as if this is something that she's been used to, that she accepts that it's a reality, and that she realized that, you know, allowing it to affect her view or perception of the world is wrong. You know what I mean? She literally, like, it's actually kind of like sophisticated, actually. It's kind of deep for, you know, a little 12-year-old, 13-year-old person to actually understand and appropriately cope with. So I think as childish as her character is, I think her character is actually very sensitive and very deep, and, you know, probably one of my favorite characters in the whole show. I think I really liked her.
Edward, how dare they? Edward is a lot of fun. I really like that character. So we've kind of introduced you to each character. We've kind of hinted at their backstories. I feel like now the best way to go is to kind of fully describe the arc of each character throughout the series. And we're kind of... So Spike is the main character, so he has the main arc. And by arc, I mean the background with him and another character named Vicious. So we can talk about that arc. Faye has her arc that we know about, and then Jet has a few arcs as well. And we get the background of Ed as well. So Ein's the only one who doesn't get further explained, but the key thing we missed is that Ein and Ed, once they meet, have an instant connection that is super strong. They are always together after that point in the series, and they seem to get along quite well. And if there was any character on the Bebop that knew Ein was more than meets the eye, I feel like it's definitely Edward. Edward knows that this dog is more than what he says, is cool with it, and doesn't ever make it a big deal. He's just like, yeah, this is Ein. So yeah, let's do that. I think that's probably a good stretch here. So we'll go with the main character first because he's the most important of the show, and he gets the most in-depth explanation. But the structure of the show is kind of like a thread of the week or monster of the week show. So each week there's oftentimes a bounty that they go after, and different episodes highlight different characters' personality. Kind of, we learn more about generally one character more than any other for an episode, but we also have a cool bounty that tells a really cool story as well. And I want to get to those stories eventually, but let's kind of finish our main our characters first, our main ones, the ones we love so much. So Spike, like I said, he was part of the Syndicate, this group of organized crimes led by the Elders, 3 old dudes who look really, really, really similar to each other. It's kind of weird. They're short and fat. So he was part of the Syndicate, and he left, and we don't know why he left for a while, but he left the Syndicate, and he had a good friend in the Syndicate called Vicious. Vicious is kind of an opposite to Spike in the sense that Spike, while being generally kind of like a free-flowing devil-may-care attitude, he still has a genuine likability about him and the personality, right? Like, you would like to hang out with Spike.
And he has a morality, too.
Is that as well. So Vicious has no morality. Mm-mm. He doesn't care as well, but about everything, as opposed to Spike, where it's more like, things are happening, whatever. Like, my ship's broke, whatever. While Vicious is just like, I don't care about anything except what seems to be getting more power and killing Spike, because Spike betrayed him. So we get a lot of flashbacks of them seeming. It's that one shot where they're back to back shooting people and like smiling at each other. Right. 8 times in the show.
We're best friends.
Yeah, they seem to have gotten really along because they were both really. What I'm assuming, Spike and Vicious were kind of like muscle men / hitmen for the Syndicate, and Spike left, and Vicious, who we don't get too much background on, seems like he was super betrayed by not only Spike leaving the Syndicate, but another new character called Julia, who wanted to lead the Syndicate. We'll talk about her later. But that's kind of that background. And we get introduced to Vicious, I think, pretty early in the season. I think it's the beginning, the middle, and the end. We have the story of Spike's background and with Vicious and Julia and the Syndicate. So all we know about Vicious is that he apparently really doesn't like Spike, but they have history. And they try and kill each other every time they hang out. Like, from this whole series, if they're ever on screen, they're trying to kill each other. Vicious has that awesome silver anime hair, right? That's like, how do they do that? Like, it looks so cool. How can I do that to my hair? And then he has that cool raven bird on his shoulder, and he fights with a samurai sword. Like, he's stereotypical, awesome bad guy. You're like, that guy, I want to hate him, but he looks pretty cool. So he's the head muscle for the Syndicate. Him and Spike meet up at the beginning, and we have that great kind of dynamic between them, where I believe, and I'm paraphrasing because it's been a while, I don't remember the exact speech, but Vicious is kind of like, you're a dog or you're an animal that's lost his way, and I need to put you out of your misery. He kind of has that vibe towards Spike. And we have that great showdown in the church, which is one of the very first cool fight scenes. All the fight scenes are awesome, but the church scene was really dope. And they have their confrontation. Spike, of course, like a video game, has to kill everyone leading up to the final boss, while just, Vicious hangs out at the very end. And then so Spike's often shot or something, and he's injured, and he has to fight him. And Vicious almost gets the best of Spike in the first encounter. But as Spike's falling down, you see that he pulled the grenade pin, like, just which is super slick. He was just like, as he's falling back, we get that great music, that whole scene where he's like flashing through his life of like the background we don't fully understand now, but like it's just so awesome, such an awesome shot. So basically, Spike met a girl named Julia, as all stories start. A guy met a girl.
A guy
Well,
met a girl.
this story someone met someone. That's how the story starts. And Spike was a hitman, and he met a girl that concluded. And we kind of get to learn more about her in the latter part of the show, but we'll go ahead and tell the story now. So he met a girl. He was injured. She nursed him back to health, and he kind of describes her as, I was not a complete person until I met her, and she completed me. And we get the backstory that he wanted to leave the syndicate. He told Julia, "Meet me at this place." And that, I don't think he said at that moment in time that it was meet me at the graveyard, but he like gave her a note, "Meet me here." Note's important. He gave her a note. Remember that. And so we get, I think, the rest of the flashbacks, which we never get like a full viewing of that, the flashback we always see, but it seems like he kind of had to either fake his own death or just kill a bunch of people to get out of the syndicate. And they're supposed to be at the gravesite, but she never shows up. And then we find out why. We know Julia's a character, and we know whenever Julia's name gets brought up, like in the midpoint, Jupiter Jazz Part 1 and 2 was the 2 episodes, which was a great 2 episodes.
Right.
Vicious used the code name Julia to, I don't think he was trying to get Spike back, but he just used it probably to spite him. So Julia is always on his mind, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And he never understands why she didn't show up. I don't even know if he knows she's alive. I don't think he knows she's alive. And during the events of Jupiter Jazz, we kind of get more context about Vicious, really, than we do about Spike and Vicious. And I guess we can kind of talk about that now. We get some background on Vicious and how he fought in the war with the character who played the saxophone in that 2 episodes, and I forgot his name. And it's going to bother me.
Yeah, it was either Lin or Shin. Shin's the brother, though.
Not that character. I know who you're talking about.
You're talking about, Mr. Saxophone. Yeah. I don't remember his name either.
So the unwilling transsexual of the show. Apparently he was in prison and they performed a sexual, I forgot he ends up becoming transgender because he was in prison and experimented on, which is super messed up to do to anyone unwillingly. But it makes his character super fascinating. He seems to be kind of taken in stride. He's just like, yeah, well, this is life. And he plays the saxophone really good.
And I play the sax.
Really good. So Spike often fights with Vicious, and then what we kind of get the backstory is that Spike and Julia had a relationship. They were going to leave together. Vicious found out. Vicious apparently was pretty close with Julia as well. I don't know if they were together at all or not. We have that one flashback of who looks like Vicious getting out of bed with Julia, but I have no idea if that's who it was. We don't get too much. They're all flashbacks and cutbacks. But anyways, so Vicious is very upset that Julia was about to betray him and says, "Here's your choices. Either you kill him or I kill you both." And so that's how we learn why Julia didn't show up to the gravesite. She rips that actual note, and we get a cool scene from the beginning of the series of just this paper trail falling down from. It's a great shot, and it's really cool, but you're like, why does this matter? Until we get to the 25th episode, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, It was the location. She didn't want them to know where Spike was, and she just runs away for her life. And Spike ends up doing the same thing. And they were both kind of trying to protect each other, but we never get too much on-screen time between them. We know that he cares about her a lot, and clearly she cares about him a lot, but we really don't even get to see him hang out that often. And so Spike's arc kind of starts with, and he says the speech quite often, and I like it a lot. So apparently he had two eye colors, and it's really hard to tell because it was like brown and a slightly different shade of brown. But if we find out towards the end that he had one eye damaged in some fight or something, and so it's a fake eye. And he has this awesome speech he repeats a couple times where he has one eye in the past and one eye in the future, and he feels like he can't wake up from the dream he's living. And his arc, and maybe that kind of describes or is the reason behind his devil may care kind of watery, flowy attitude, right? Is that he just doesn't know. Does he want to keep living? Does he want to die? Like he's just kind of doing his thing. Um, and we get towards the end of his story, which is at the end of the series, where he finds out Julia's alive. He tries to save her and rescue her. Julia ends up getting shot in the fracas because Vicious, by the way, had successfully executed a coup against the elders in the syndicate. And Julie ends up getting shot and killed. And we get the final standoff where Vicious is waiting. He knows Spike's going to come after him. Spike is totally okay with this. And we get some heartbreaking scenes where Jet, because Spike was off with Julia, and Spike and Jet was like, I don't think I'm ever going to see him again. But then Spike shows up. And Spike's like, oh, really happy. But really quickly, he understands, like, you're about to leave again and go do your thing, right? And this is what I was talking about with their dynamic, is that Spike is, or Jet's kind of like, he has that line where he's like, just tell me one thing. Are you doing it for her? Like, he already knows. He already knows everything because he knows Spike so well.
Right, yeah.
And,
He's wise old
and
hen.
and that's the extent of their conversation. Besides, when I think at this point, I think this is the point where uh, the first time in the series where Spike tells a story to Jet, he's like, "Did you ever hear the one about the tiger striped cat?" And kind of goes, it's pretty much telling his story of him and Julia, just with cats as the anecdote. And he's like, tells her how much Julia meant to him. And Jet didn't know this until this point because Spike doesn't really talk that much about himself. And Spike goes to confront Vicious. And then we get a good scene of Faye, who doesn't want him to go. Like, why? You told me to live in the future and forget your past, because we learned that Faye doesn't know about her past. So Jet's just like, this, the past doesn't matter. Just keep living. And we get this speech about the eyes. That's where we learn that. And she's like, well, why are you going there to die? And she's like, I'm not going there to die. I'm going out there to find out if I want to live. And that's his motivation right now. That's his arc. He didn't know what he was doing in life. He half in the past, half in the future. He didn't know if he was living or not. He felt like he was in a dream he couldn't ever wake up from. So the final confrontation is him finding out, does he want to live or should he live? And he knows he's probably going to die, and he just goes for it. And we get a great action scene where he has an awesome, gun shoots and blazing, awesome shots, throwing bombs randomly, and you're like, why'd you place that bomb there? And then 5 seconds later, you're like, oh yeah, I mean, those two guys died. Like, he just blows it up. Awesome. Like, he ends up getting shot.
This is a huge part to the story because
Yeah.
I think he finally reveals himself um, as a character, but also as a human being, I am I am unapologetically this person,
Hmm.
you know, in the sense of I understand I told you, Faye, to forget your past, to not worry about it, but you can't remember it. I have to live with mine. So, what I mean? This is Spike all cards on the table. Even with Jet, the cat story, that's just the way they talk. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's just how they communicate. He is essentially literally revealing his entire being, his entire function. Um, like over the span of like these, what is this? This is like one episode or two episodes. Like it might
It's
all
a
be this.
two-parter.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, over these two episodes, you get everything that you should ever need or want to know about Spike.
Yeah. And we get the awesome action scene. We're introduced to, and this is the second time, Shin, not Lin. There's Lin and Shin. They're there. It's kind of funny that they're there. Lin was part of the syndicate and had to protect Vicious because that's the law of the syndicate. But he was really good friends with Spike, I guess, or at least Spike didn't want to kill him, and that's how Spike ends up getting shot with a trank dart in the middle part of the series. But then he gets Lin gets killed, and his brother Shin, who looks exactly like him, a twin brother, shows up to help Spike in the end. And they're interesting characters in the sense that uh, I kind of like their mentality and I like their morality, but we don't learn much about them. And it almost seems like they're there to be, well, Spike needs some help, so let's make this character. Like, Vicious will definitely kill Spike in the halfway through the season, so we can't have that happen. Let's let Lin shoot him. But then Lin betrayed, so he gets killed. But then we still need Spike to kind of have a reason why he was able to get past all these people. Oh, let's introduce this other Shin. It kind of felt like that, but whatever. I'm fine with it. It's fine. Like, I'm not at this point. I wasn't just. It didn't stop the show. I'm like, who the hell's Shin? I was just like, yeah, okay, he's just a guy. It's cool. Of course, you have a brother that we haven't talked about until this point. Um, so it leads us to the final confrontation between Vicious and Spike, and we get that theme from Vicious again that Spike is an animal, doesn't know where he's supposed to go anymore, and it kind of reflects Spike and how he feels about himself. Maybe not the animal part, but he doesn't know what to do with his life, and he's like, Julie's dead, and I gotta put you down, man. Like, and we have that great final fight where Vicious is definitely a dude who uses knives and blades more, while Spike uses traditional guns, and it's an awesome fight. I'm not even going to try and describe it to you, but I want to highlight one specific scene where they injure each other, and Vicious loses his katana, and Spike loses his handgun, and they kind of slide over to opposites, right? So Vicious has the gun, and Spike has the blade. And I was like, okay, cool. We get to see how they fight with the alternate weapon. And Spike and they kind of have this stare off. They're bleeding. Spike's already been shot in the shoulder. He got slashed somewhere. I forgot where he got slashed. Vicious got shot somewhere too from Spike. And they kind of just stand at each other and they're like, "Let's finish this now." And Vicious is like, "All right." And then they hand each other their traditional weapons back. So Vicious throws the handgun and Spike throws the knife, and then immediately they go at it. So Spike gets a shot off. Yeah, Spike gets a shot off, which ends up killing Vicious immediately. But Vicious gets a slash right in Spike's gut, and it's like, so Vicious dies immediately, and Spike's kind of hunched over, and you tell he's messed up. So at this point, like I think I glossed over it. The story isn't explained too much in the show, but Vicious had successfully had a coup of the syndicate. So now he's the leader of the syndicate. So Spike has essentially killed the leader of the syndicate. And so far as what I understand for syndicate rules, bylaw 5, subsection 6, paragraph 2, is that when you kill the leader of the syndicate, you become the leader of the syndicate.
You keep what you kill?
Yeah. And so everyone's kind of like, who was trying to kill him is like, shit, like, he's the guy, right? Like, and so he's just walking down some stairs. We get a great shot of just him, kind of zoomed out of him, just kind of like hobbling down these stairs. And the very last scene of the series and of our character Spike is he smiles, he looks at the camera,
It was so
not
funny.
direct, and he raises his hand up and he's just like bang, and just falls dead. End of series. Complete.
What? So, like, did he die? Is that what we're
Pretty
going?
sure.
Like,
Pretty sure
we're
he
going
died.
with death? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been shot, stabbed, and cut 25, 30 times in a 26 episode series. It's like every other episode he gets shot.
He does get messed up quite a bit.
Yeah. No,
He's no Frank.
I thought it was a great ending.
He's no Frank Castle. He's no Frank Castle, but
No.
he does get messed up quite a bit.
He does.
One of my favorite Spike moments before we go past this character is the first time he gets messed up, and Faye is singing like he remembers Julia singing when he was injured back in the past. It was another flashback, and this is kind of how he fell in love with Julia. And Faye's humming some tune, and it kind of makes him have that flashback and think about Julia. And he's like bandaged up like a mummy, essentially, and he's like, murmur, and Faye's like, what? And she gets close, and he's like, you're off tune.
And then all you hear is a wow.
Like, hits him, and he screams. Yeah, that's Spike's story. I like Spike a lot. The story is mainly about him. He is the main character, but it does seem like we have our particular moments where we get to learn more about him. He's the smoothest SOB I can think of, and it's again goes back to that Bruce Lee like water thing. He pickpockets people left and right in the show, and it's super cool. He just accidentally runs into different scenarios, and he just plays it like whatever. Like, I'm just gonna flow with this. And we also get that dynamic of that one episode with the other bounty hunter who's a complete idiot, who's a cowboy.
Yeah.
That is kind of very similar to Spike, and everyone kind of tells him that, and he really gets pissed off that he is like kind of a poorer reflection of who he is. I just really like this character, and that's kind of his overall story arc. And I hope we did him justice because he is a really, really cool dude. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on him before we move on to Jet, but he's a really cool dude.
No, I really liked him. The only thing I didn't like, I only had one complaint about his character, and in the beginning of the story, they really make him out to be like an expert martial artist. And as the story progresses, he actually gets a little bit worse. I don't think it's part of the story, but like essentially they need him to keep getting his ass kicked, and there's only one way to do that, right? And that's to let him get his ass kicked, you know. And so I guess I just kind of had, and this is going back to my technical, my technical issue with it is like, well, you painted him as such like this martial arts master, a combat ready type of person, and then he kind of like starts to get his butt kicked a lot, in the end. So I was just
To be fair, the people that kick his ass are interesting characters that have a backstory where it's like, okay, yeah, okay, I understand. Like, God, I forgot his name. I wrote his name down. The gentleman with the top hat and the creepy guy. I wrote his name down. So keep going.
He's the best bad guy. Well, I mean, it's literally the only complaint I have. Yeah, I think it's the only complaint I have.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Ein hung up on Faye. I wrote that note down. Dude in the top hat can fly. This dude soundtrack's unnerving. This dude kicks Spike's ass. Force field, cane gun, jacket full of guns. His name was Mad Perot.
Yeah, Mad Perot.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's towards the end he keeps getting his butt kicked, but I feel like they kind of explain it, especially with Matt Perot. Like, he's a really crazy dude. And then Ed's dad, who we get introduced to, with the potential of Ed focusing on whatever he wants to focus on. If Ed's dad ate a raw egg a day, he was always going to be a badass. Like, that's just law, man. Like, it made sense to me. That's all I needed to know. But yeah, no, he's really cool. All right, movie watchers. It turns out we are so passionate about this series that we went ahead and talked for an hour and a half, and we feel we have quite a couple more hours to talk about this show, but we kind of have to take a break. So we're going to take a break real quick. We might be wearing different clothes when we come back, but that's because we're wearing different clothes because it's a different day. But we don't want to interrupt the plot through, or rush through the other four characters we really want to dive into. So we're going to take a break. For you, it will be a break of whatever, a couple seconds, but for us, it'll be a couple days. But yeah, so this is part one, I guess, of this show. We'll continue on later, which should be run. I'm gonna actually, by the time we should have our awesome intro music, I'll probably just play the intro music right now. We'll fade into it right now. We're fading.
That'll be perfect.
Fading into the music, and then we'll continue.
Don't sleep. Pay attention.
Yeah. Later.
Peace.
All right, man. See you, man.